Welcome to Nonprofit Conversations, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. Don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss an exciting episode. This week, I talk with our guest, Brian Haney of the Haney Company. And our topic, 3 financial secrets for nonprofits. Welcome to episode 179. Hey everybody, it's Monday, January 16th, and that means it's time for another exciting episode of Nonprofit Conversations, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm a certified association executive, and I am the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting. This week, I'm really excited to welcome back Brian Haney, who has been a guest on our show before, and he comes and shares all of his nonprofit financial management wisdom with us. This week, we're going to be talking about 3 financial secrets. Shh. So Brian's going to break the code for you about how to be successful. But first, Brian, why don't you say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Thanks, Cecilia. Love being on the show. So thanks for allowing me to be a repeat guest. Really appreciate the opportunity. And hello, everybody. What to say about myself? I think probably the most important thing is that I am world famous. I hold the current and for as long as humanly possible title of world's most embarrassing dad.
Okay.
I'll let you digest that for a second. So you're in the presence of virtual greatness, and I highly intend on continuing to compete and retain that title for at least the foreseeable future. Now that I have a teenager, so but for my day job, I masquerade as a financial, I guess, wizard, right? As my name or wherever it is there it is. Says our company helps support associations and nonprofits and kind of all things financial. So everything, insurance, benefits, retirement, you name it, whatever an organization kind of might need to be successful, we facilitate those things. So that keeps me busy when I'm not being embarrassing.
Oh, that is hysterical. So you are the world's most embarrassing dad, which is a great tie into our global audience, who I would like to welcome and say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. And you can let us know if you think Brian really is the world's most embarrassing dad, or if maybe there's another embarrassing dad somewhere else in the world. I don't know if that's a story you want to share at this point, or...
Well, let's just say there are pictures that support it that will not be revealed on this show or potentially ever. So, but anyway.
Okay, great. Well, we'll take your word for that, Brian, because we know once it's online, it never dies. So
That's right.
We'll look it up ourselves someday. Oh, that's really funny. And of course, I think I don't have kids, but having once been a teenager and been around teenagers, I know once they hit that stage, and we all hit that stage, our parents are nothing more than embarrassing us because they say hello to us. Don't speak to me. I'm in public.
Yep.
So, well, let's get on to more, I guess, interesting, happier topics like 3 financial secrets. So you've promised us 3 secrets to financial success for nonprofit organizations. So what's the first secret?
Well, yeah, all 3 are secrets in the sense that they are hidden in plain sight, as I would like to say. They are secrets, but also potentially obvious, but we just need to kind of better connect with them. I'll say the first one, I call it know your numbers. Ignorance is never bliss. It's usually a recipe for disaster at some point in the future. So, organizations need to be connected to their financial numbers, not just to report them to an auditor, but to really see how financially viable and how successful they're being as an organization. I think it's at times very easy to focus on mission and impact because that certainly drives organizations, and it should. You can't take your eyes off of that. But sometimes it can be to the detriment of really seeing things dispassionately and looking at the numbers in a very realistic way. So a couple ratios, I'll give you 3 that I think support, or at least are things that you want to kind of have a connection to. The first one's your operating reserve ratio. Just really recognizing, especially as you're doing business, right, that, that there might be a need to have a reserve dynamic. And so just kind of keeping that in mind. Certainly there was a lot of evidence as to why reserves were very important during the pandemic. Program expense ratio as well. So how much of your overall expenditures support programming and events? Certainly revenue diversity is tends to be a good thing to have, but paying attention to that, because that can change year in and year out. And last one, and probably one that I think we'll come back to a few times, just what is your profit margin ratio? I mean, the reality is non-profit does not mean you don't make money. And so, if you can't be, I think, a financially viable and thriving organization, that is something that impacts your vision and your mission and your ability to do the things that you need to do in this world, that the world needs you to do. So
right. And those are all really good points. And those are formulas. And some of us who maybe like myself struggle with numbers. I've been told I have that number condition where, like, I'm great with words, not so good with numbers. So I work extra hard on it to understand these kind of formulas and ratios and things like that. So for those other people in the audience like myself who really work hard to understand numbers, just keep in mind the numbers are telling you a story. So if you're better with words, what Brian's trying to tell you here is your numbers are telling you something. They're telling you where you are, how much you have to work with, and how much farther you can go because you have these resources, because having a handle on that is really super important, as we all know, because if we don't have resources, we can't do anything, right? So that's why we need it. And while we may use the term income and expenses when we're talking about a nonprofit organization of any kind, you still need to have that extra money. And I think this is where you see a lot of smaller nonprofits where somebody starts a nonprofit thinking, oh, it's easy. Oh, yeah, it's no problem because it's nonprofit. That's an incorporation status. As people like to say, it's not a business model. So that's a great one. So that's great. And I love, Brian, that you have framed this as secrets hiding in plain sight. So sometimes something's right in front of us and we don't see it. And we've talked a lot about know your numbers. And I love that term, ignorance is not bliss, because it really is not for anything.
Especially not financially.
Yeah, it's really, well, and ignorance about anything really is not like a way we want to go. I mean, so what's the second secret that's hiding in plain sight?
And this one is probably one of my favorites to talk about. And I'll just say, think like an entrepreneur. But what do I mean by that? Because that sounds, it gets bandied around, I think, a lot in the association nonprofit community. But, it's not cliche. It really means entrepreneurs recognize that the model for success that they're engaged in must be, success equates to financial success. There's not an option for an entrepreneur to build something that isn't financially successful. That means it fails.
Right.
And so that's part of, I think, the mystique of our culture and the fascination for entrepreneurs that just go out and make something seemingly out of nothing. Mm-hmm. But I think if we step away from it and try to take the mentality part and find a way to apply it on a more regular and reasonable basis to how we operate organizationally, I think we'll find that that type of helpful organizational thinking will not only allow us to do what we're trying to do in terms of our mission, but it'll also potentially create a better framework for what I think another term is intrapreneurialism, where we're getting that you're kind of bringing it into your culture and encouraging people to be thinking a little bit outside the box, or to be thinking about things that, maybe looking at things through a different filter, or collaborating across, different departments and all that kind of stuff, where, organizations in the public and for-profit arena, you can see that is a part of their culture that makes them continue to be successful. So just having this kind of mentality shift, mm-hmm. And finding a way to weave it into your ethos, as I like to call it, really can have a significant impact.
I love the way you just presented that concept, because entrepreneur means that you're willing to think differently. Like you said, we like to use the term outside the box. You think differently. You say, how can I do it? Not, I can't do it. You say, what if, instead of, you say, what if and why not, instead of, no, we can't. And I think that leads us into a concept that we try to get across in the nonprofit world about purposeful abandonment. So you probably see this a lot with your financial work, people hanging on to programs or services that aren't really producing anymore. And so having an entrepreneurial mindset means you let go of the stuff that doesn't work anymore, or you change it. For example, the 501c League education program that I have used to be a separate membership organization. Well, it turned out to be more of an education service than a membership service. So we evolved it. Sometimes you have to let these things kind of grow in their own direction as well. And that's another entrepreneurial approach to things. And I think, if a nonprofit organization can take that attitude and, like you said, bring that into their ethos and make it part of it, let's try something. We like to, it's another thing I like to say, Brian, is like, we talk about failure, but nobody wants to talk about failure. I mean, sometimes you try something, it doesn't work, and you just have to learn from that. And that's also an entrepreneurial mindset.
Well, I want to pick up on that word failure, because, and I'm going to share a couple things that I think hopefully people will really get excited about. I'm always excited about all these types of things. So that's just my optimism showing through. But the first thing is, failure really is an essential, necessary, critical part of success. There is no way to be good at anything if you don't fail and fail forward. You'll never read any story of major success in all of human history where there weren't a ton of, bumps along the proverbial road. Nobody just was born successful and never had any obstacles to overcome. So just understanding that failure is actually a good thing. It means you're on the right track, and failure really is just an outcome that you didn't want. That's all. It's not and we're done. We, call it quits, pack it up, we're going home. It just means, okay, we tried this experimentally speaking, and we didn't get the outcome that we were hoping to get. All right, so then what do we need to do to reframe, to try again? And I want to use one story that a lot of us are probably familiar with, and it's a product hopefully most people are familiar with. It's called WD-40.
Oh, yes. I love WD-40.
So WD-40 has been around forever. We all use it to, take care of those squeaks and joints and all the other stuff. It's amazing, right? Everybody's got it in their household. But people don't realize that the name WD-40 comes from the fact that it was the 40th formula that worked. Meaning they kept WD-40 because WD-39 through 1 were all failures. But we don't know about those 39 other times. We only get to work with the product that we know and love as WD-40.
I did not know that.
It's on their website. You can read the story for yourself. But think about that for a second. Nobody knows about all the stuff that didn't go right. We just know, oh, wow, this was super successful. I'm so glad somebody figured this formula out, because, every time I got a squeak somewhere, that's immediately what I'm reaching for. But
right, or like a sticky drawer,
Yeah, but that's a great, again, real life example as to why, entrepreneurial thinking has to be a part of, I think, any for or nonprofit type of organization. And how do you make margin for kind of creative experimentation? Taking risks, find a way to take risks in a controlled environment. Experiment with things so that way you can learn, you can get out of your own way, you can have those paradigm shifts that are so critical for long-term success. But again, just finding a way to have this mentality become woven into all of the elements of what you're doing only will lead you to more success. And being afraid to do it long-term may hurt you.
Right. Well, and that's such an excellent point. I'm kind of shaking my head for those of you out there listening on audio. I'm kind of shaking my head back and forth because it just reminds me, and I'm sure you hear this a lot too, Brian, about, well, that's the way we've always done it. And people say, well, they don't want to change something because it always reminds me of this great example when I worked with volunteers at a specialty bar association, and I worked with the chapters and in what we call national committees. And we changed the format of a networking event for the national committees at one of the conferences. And one of them came up to me and said, what if it doesn't work? And I said, then we won't do it again. And their eyes got so big, like I had just turned on a light bulb for them or something. I'm like, oh, we just won't do it again. Right. We just won't do it again. Right. It's sort of like that scene in The Birdcage where Robin Williams and Nathan Lane are out having lunch and he broke his toast. Nathan Lane broke the toast and got upset. And he said, no, we'll just get more toast. Oh, we can just get more toast. Right. So I think that, what a lot of what I have seen that relates to what you've just shared is that, people forget that that's not the only option. I mean, we wouldn't have WD-40 if they gave up on WD-3, right?
Exactly.
Like we just keep moving forward. And I think if we could really change that, and I don't know why we got locked into that mindset at some organizations, but we see it a lot. And I think it's because we tend to copy each other. Humans are great mimics, I think.
Well, and I think the association part of the nonprofit space, I think probably is more connected to this. I think a lot of times pure nonprofits, especially those with significant missions that receive significant donations and funding, it is very easy for the mission to overwhelm your mentality. And that's such a good thing in many aspects, right? Because if you're saving whales or the planet or whatever, we need you to be doing that.
Right.
Don't stop doing that. But it's then stepping out of that for, to be able to also recognize that these are some other necessary components now that we just don't always see that really need to drive home, this is what it's going to take for us to continue to be great at our mission. And that's, you see that as a theme that I think just, it's harder to get that mentality in certain parts of the nonprofit space. I think especially the further down you go into, how funding is and what is the shared vision and all that other stuff. It's a galvanizing experience, but I think at the same time, especially organizational leaders, find a way to galvanize your people also around thinking outside the box, because that'll that's just going to really do a lot for the organization itself. And who knows, maybe you're the organization that comes up with the next great thing that changes the world. It doesn't all have to happen in a think tank in a for-profit, laboratory somewhere.
Right.
You ready for number 3?
Yeah, and I do want to say before we do number 3, I just want to add on to that really quickly. It's okay to do something different. It's okay to try something new, because again, if it doesn't work, you just don't do it again. And that's really, I think the most important thing is we do have to try different things to find the thing that works. Because again, if they had stopped at 39, we wouldn't have WD-40, right? Yep. So keep going. So what's number 3? I'm excited.
Yeah, this one's probably the least fun. But I'm just gonna categorize it as manage risks, because risk is a given, right? It's like waking up and putting on clothes. If you're alive, you're gonna face risks. So as an organization, there's 2 real key components to what do you do with that allow you to be successful. The first one is to see the risks for what they are as it relates to your organization. And there's a lot of, elements to effective risk management, but again, being intentional about going through that process. What are the things that would make us financially unviable? What are the risks in how we're operating? Sometimes I think nonprofits have a tendency to not think they have competition, but there's competition everywhere. And especially now in a fully digital global economy, there are things that might pop up from out of nowhere that, even if it's not something that you think might be a directly competing organization thing, whatever, that could have an impact on what you're doing. And so just always recognizing that, just because we're flying that proverbial nonprofit flag doesn't mean that, we've cornered the market in whatever we're going to do. And we're never going to have to be recognizing that something could derail us from achieving mission success. So once you see it for what it is, then I think the other necessary component is to create policies and procedures, because everybody should have them. I think a big area that, certainly the pandemic exposed, pulled the curtain all the way back on is, I just mentioned, we live in a digital economy. It's not a question of where we're working, is it hybrid, all that other stuff. The fact is, we're doing this recording virtually, digitally. We're all in the digital cyberspace at some level. And so your cyber and your virtual and your digital risks have evolved dramatically in the last 3 years, and that will only continue to increase. So again, an area that I think a lot of nonprofit exposure happens is the fact that, we don't always try to take a look at how do we operate, how do our employees operate in a safe virtual or digital or cyber environment, even if you're coming into an office space. So be looking at that. And then the great thing about risks is once you really see them for what they are, a lot of times there's insurance for them. Not always. And sometimes you have to look at it. Do I want to pay an insurance company to protect me, or do I want to take this risk on myself? But once you see the risks for what they are, that's the best way to then go out and create an insurance framework that will optimally protect you the right way, so you can transfer the risks you should transfer to an insurance company, and then work with them to manage the cost of that. Because insurance companies like to know, hey, just because you're paying us a premium doesn't mean you can then you don't pay your car insurance and then go around and drive blind and get an accident. It doesn't give us a license to be stupid and to do things we shouldn't be doing. But really having a good, when you see it for what it is, you have policies and procedures designed to allow you to operate really effectively and make everyone a part of that risk management solution, not just the CEO or not just the CTO or whatever roles we want to put on. Every single party is a part of success and or failure. And then taking advantage of any type of risk management framework that we can transfer risk to a disinterested third party that will come in and protect you in the event that something happens.
That's right. Well, and at first I'm kind of laughing because you said driving blind. For our global audience and our domestic audience here in the US, Brian and I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and the traffic here is really bad. And it seems like people are driving blind with, or the blindfold on, I should say, sometimes. But
it is an interesting and very risky, fraught experience when you're going out and about in the Washington, D.C. Roadways, so to speak.
It really is, which is why we all make sure we have our car insurance up to date, just in case.
Oh, yeah.
We have to drive, we do our best, but you can't control the other drivers. So that's
sadly, I've tried for many years and I had to stop.
It's like mind control, It's kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's not the left turn you want to make.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway,
From the right lane across 3 lanes of traffic. Yeah.
Oh my God. And that happens so often. We all just go, oh yeah. Anyway. But this is why risk management, bringing it back to the third secret, is so important, because we don't know what's coming at us, is really the point of that example. I think we don't know what other people are doing. We only know what we're doing, and we can only control our own actions. And so looking at risk as not something to avoid, but something to almost embrace in a way, because you're right. You said that about just getting on, putting your clothes on, you're at risk. I mean, who hasn't almost lost their balance trying to put their pants on? If we want to admit it to ourselves or not, it happens. You're trying to put your pants on, you lose your balance, you almost fall over, and that happens. And actually a lot of data shows that you're probably at the highest risk of something happening to you when you're in your own home. You're going to slip in the bathtub, fall down the steps, trip over your dog, kick one of your kids' toys, whatever it is. Our home environment is probably the most dangerous because we're there the most often. You slip on the floor or something. So risk is just something that happens that you're not expecting. And I think if you kind of look at it that way, that's why you can manage it. You can manage risk because it's just looking out for the unexpected. So it's somebody dinging your car in the parking lot, or somebody, unfortunately, on staff clicking on that phishing email, to your point about digital security, and taking down your whole system because now you're in ransomware.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you never want to be one lawsuit away from financial insolvency.
That's right. Now that's a formula you should have had at the beginning.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that. And that's really the thing. I think you talked a lot. These 3 secrets are wonderful. And as you said, they are right out in plain sight. One of the things, though, could you talk a little bit more about the importance of having a reserve fund? Because I know a lot of organizations don't have one, or they don't understand the difference between the checking account and the reserve fund, or they maybe don't have enough money in the reserve fund. And I think that's another secret of financial success.
Yeah, no, it's having reserves is a good idea for both personal finances as well as organizational finances, because again, the question really becomes, it boils down to, if X happens, why? Where's the money going to come from? And so a reserve fund is really designed to provide you with, something that you can lean on financially if a scenario comes where, let's say, you go through a really hard financial year and the revenue isn't what it needs to be. And yes, you feel like you're not going to go down the pathway of non-existence or financial insolvency, but your expenses and what have you still stayed the same. And therefore, what are you going to do in that situation? Good reserves management also give you the chance to do things like experiment. If you have capital that's set aside that you think you could take advantage of to grow, or to be strategic, or to be more nimble as an organization, that puts you in a much better financial position to look at doing that. So I think just, it's more than just the rainy day, but reserves really are about, creating some kind of a financial bucket that allows you to weather any potential storms, as well as, be on a healthy trajectory for growth or transition, right? Nimbleness and financial flexibility. Having good reserves keeps you financially flexible, whereas insufficient or, really not thinking about it that way can be a risk in and of itself right there. Because, especially if you're funded by a lot of donations. When you think about that, sometimes maybe there's one big donor check that, could make or break some of the things that you're trying to do. So, just making sure that you have a way to incubate yourself from that is critically important.
And, that was a great explanation of that and why it's important. And I really appreciate that, because I think what we tend to forget, just in the crush of events, is that the economy affects our donors as well. Mm-hmm. And the economy affects our members. So to your point about that, one donor check could make or break an important project, or make or break payroll, or make or break the rent if you're renting an office space. So it is really important to make sure you have at least 3 months, if not 6 months, of operating expenses set aside. And then if you are in that position of having the additional funding in a reserve fund, to try something new. I think a lot of people were glad they had reserve funds in 2020 and 2021. Although I know boards are hesitant to dip into that because it is the reserve fund. But that is why that money is there. If you don't use it, it's not doing you any good in a lot of ways. So, well, gee, it's always so fun having you on the show, and world's most embarrassing father. We'll have to have you back to talk about that.
Sure, absolutely.
So, but thank you for sharing these 3 financial secrets and pointing out that they're right there in front of us, sort of in plain sight, and maybe we just aren't paying attention. So, Brian, as you know, being a previous guest, I like to ask, what is the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And if they want to follow up with you and find out how the Haney Company could help them become financial wizards as well, what's the best way to get in touch?
Sure. I think my one thought is, and since it's the beginning of 2023, let's take advantage of that New Year's resolution mentality and just, have kind of a financial resolution framework that we're going to apply this year to our mindset about, what is it going to take for us to be fiscally successful in 2023 and beyond. So if you haven't done that, hopefully you have. Hopefully you're into, several days or weeks into the plan, and things are going very, very well. But just take this as that opportunity to put out the best vision and cast it, not just from an organizational standpoint, but from a money standpoint as well, because it never hurts to do that. I think I'm a fairly Googleable person, but certainly check out our company's website, which is thehaneycompany.com. That's spelled THEHANEY company.com. I have a podcast myself, which you feel free to listen to on any of the platforms, the Haney Company Financial Guy Show. And I'm highly visible on LinkedIn as well. So love to connect with anybody in the audience that just wants to chat more, or if there is somebody that's trying to contest my world record, then feel free to be engaged in the fight of your life.
This could turn into one of those steel cage matches for most embarrassing father. Never know. So, well, thank you so much, everyone in our audience. I want to thank you for listening, and I definitely want to thank Brian Haney of the Haney Company, financial wizard, and potentially the world's most embarrassing father. It depends on how you rate these things. So thanks for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help you bloom outside the box, check out our website at roguetulips.com. If you're a current CAE or a CAE candidate and you're looking for some interesting education or support to prep for the exam, check out our education program, the 501c League. It has its own website, the 501cleague.net. And this year, we've launched our very first digital course catalog, which you can download for no fee in PDF format. So check that out as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We're pretty much everywhere now. And you can look for Brian's podcast as well, pretty much any service. So check out all of our podcasts, my podcast and Brian's podcast. So thanks, everybody, on behalf of Brian and myself, and we will see you next time.